Hi, welcome back to My Clarity After Scientology. Today we are going to do a video that shows the comparisons between the show The Path and Scientology. Now, The Path is a show that is actually premiering tonight for their third season. The show I actually got into about a year and a half ago or so. Kind of a hard time watching it because there's a huge amount of similarities between this show and between Scientology. And I've actually mentioned before that I wanted to do a video about just basically the compare and contrast. And so we're going to do that tonight. Okay, so what is the premise of the show? The premise of the show basically is this group called Myrinism. And I actually got some notes. I'm going to actually read over what the breakdown of what the show or what Myrinism is. So Myrinism is a fictional movement in the series founded by Dr. Stephen Myers. In the show's mythology, on October 28th, 1974, Meyer literally climbed a ladder. Now listen to this. Those who know about Scientology, comparisons are going to be made very easily. So Meyer literally climbed a ladder of burning light to receive a message of universal truth. Climbed a ladder of burning light to receive the message of universal truth. Meyer gave his followers the instructions for their spiritual development, written in the first book of Myrinism, called The Ladder. Myrists believe that all people are damaged, which is the cause of the world's suffering. Okay, I'm going to stop right here. The creator of the show, her name is Jessica Goldberg, and I'm not calling her out about any of this, but she has said in multiple articles, which I'm going to put in as a link on this video so you can look at them, but she has said that she never actually took or made this to be a comparison to Scientology, that she actually used, which is very believable when you really look at this from a whole of different cults that are out there. It's really more taking from the essence of cults and coming up with this. I just happen to be a lot more familiar with Scientology for obvious reasons. All right. So through personal enlightenment, they seek to become aware of suffering in themselves and others, and to heal the world, caring deeply about family, humanity, and the environment. Okay, so Scientology doesn't give a shit about the environment. Although if you look at the dynamics, first dynamic is being self, second dynamic being the family unit, third dynamic being immediate groups, like people you work with, fourth dynamic being mankind, fifth dynamic being the material universe, matter, energy, space, and time. Sixth dynamic is, I've completely forgotten the sixth dynamic. Damn it. Seventh dynamic is the spiritual dynamic. Eighth dynamic is the God dynamic. What is the sixth dynamic? Oh, animals, all living things. Excuse me. Wow, I should remember that. Yeah, so sixth dynamic is all living things. But there's not one aspect anywhere within Scientology of caring about the environment, which is kind of, as far as the show goes, kind of an important point of the show. Okay. So caring deeply about family, humanity, and the environment. Of course, Scientology says you care deeply about your dynamics, and therefore all your decisions are made on the greatest good for the greatest number of dynamics. Scientology being the dynamic. All right, so in this way and others, they create a heavenly garden of Myers' vision here on earth. Read this again. In this way and others, they create the heavenly garden of Myers' vision here on earth. So there literally is a garden that he created, vision-wise or thought-wise, or through his writings of like the ideal scene of what we want this planet to be like, and they refer to it as the garden, which is, in Scientology's terms, is a cleared planet. Something very vague, something that is not really defined anywhere. It's never said on the show what kind of fruit is going to be in the garden, and I'm being a little sarcastic there. But in the same sense that when you've quizzed and listened to the videos by Scientologists that were in upper management, and it was asked, what does it mean to clear the planet? There was no real definition. It was always vague. I mean, you would think clearing the planet means getting rid of the reactive mind of the planet, but you can't do that because you can't clear 7 billion people. It's impossible. I mean, they don't even have 50,000 members, so how do you do that? All right, so this is where it gets interesting too. So, however, the latter, which is in comparison to Scientology's bridge, and I believe there's 8 rungs, and this is where Jessica Goldberg, or I kind of don't believe her because there's eight OT levels. There's 8 levels, 8 rungs. They're called. Every level is called a rung. 8 rungs of the ladder. 8 OT levels. However, the ladder foretells that their efforts will be thwarted by non-believers or ignorant systemics or ISs, whose selfish actions will result in an apocalypse. But those who ascend the ladder of enlightenment will live forever in the garden. Okay. So we step back for a moment and we look at, all right, I'm not an expert in cults. I have one understanding of a cult, and that is Scientology. Obviously, I've read about Jonestown. I read about the weird one with the Nikes and everyone died in bunk beds. Jehovah's Witnesses, other organizations like that where there's one supreme being or one supreme leader. There's a whole organization built around them. There's always, there's always that separation. Okay, so they're calling them ignorant systemites. Excuse me, I mispronounced it. Systemites. Ignorant systemites. ISs. Scientology refers to people who are not Scientologists as WOGs. Never understood the definition of that word, and I'm not going to. I mean, it's not worth it. But it's the way. The idea is that you have that word there so you can now be superior because now you've given a degraded type of identity to people that are not involved in your religion. So now you're better than, or you're above them, or you're superior to them. So their efforts will be thwarted by non-believers. So in Scientology's case, we're talking about psychiatry, or ignorant Semites, ISs, whose selfish actions result in an apocalypse. But those who ascend the ladder of enlightenment will live forever in the garden. Obviously, those who ascend the ladder. So those who give millions of dollars to the church, put up with all the bullshit, go through all the sec checks, disconnect from every single family member, never really go out and actually enjoy life, will ascend to target 2, I think. I don't know. It never really says what's next. And in fact, actually, from what I know from OT8, it doesn't, which is not supposed to be the last level, but there's no end. There's no end in sight, basically. All right, so the movement claims 6,000 members with facilities in San Diego, California, in Parkdale, New York, and a retreat center located in Cusco, Peru. By the second season, they also open up a place in Queens. Most practice Myrinism in everyday life, similar to Scientology. You apply the technology to your life and to your environment around you, while others have taken vows of service and dedicate themselves to counseling, recruitment, and outreach programs. Now we've come to Scientology, and actually we've come to Jehovah's Witnesses. We've come to Hare Krishnas. You have that core group of people that will sacrifice themselves or sacrifice their time or agree to work on this full time, and that's what they have on the show, and that's what the show kind of surrounds, is the particular lives of these individual people, which I'll get to very shortly. And outreach programs. Funny story about the show is the very first episode, and it doesn't ruin anything to tell you this. If I remember correctly, there was a hurricane or some sort of natural disaster. Now, the show is based in Westchester County or upstate New York, up towards Albany. but maybe it wasn't a hurricane, it was just a flood and a bad storm. It was weird, but the group of Myrists showed up in vans to be there for relief. And someone had actually cracked a joke in the show saying, wow, they got here faster than the Scientology volunteer ministers ever did, which was kind of funny watching that. Okay, so let's move on here because I don't really want to make this a super long video. However, founder Stephen Myers warned against media attention. Scientology never did. They loved media attention. No, they hated media attention. Right. That's why they have celebrities involved. That the movement should remain small, which Scientology never wanted, and publicity should be kept to a minimum. Spiritual progress is evaluated on an ascending series of rungs from R1 to R10. My apologies, it's actually R10. With many decisions made by senior members or upper rungers, UR, they go by abbreviations, very similar to Scientology. Myrists practice meditation and use biofeedback device and drugs, including cannabis, and it's spelled, I've never seen this word before, AYAHUASCA. I'll look it up later. To aid in reaching the deeper levels of consciousness and put considerable stock in visions and intuition, which are believed to be the light trying to communicate with them. Okay, so here's your differentiation of Scientology. The rungs are done on a very personal level, although someone walks you through the steps of the rung, but a lot of it, as it says, what I just read here, is they actually use drugs, cannabis, which I don't, it's a medicinal drug as far as I'm concerned, and this other drug, I'm going to guess probably find it somewhere in Central America. So that's the show. Very interesting. I mean, that's a premise of Myrist. Now, the show is, just to go over the cast really quick, because it's a really good cast. If you haven't noticed, I actually really like the show. So, Aaron Paul, he plays Eddie Lane. Now, you know Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad, as well as, I'm sure he's on a few other things. But okay, then there's Hugh Dancy as Calvin or Cal Roberts. Then there's Michelle Monaghan, iRobot. She was in that. She's also been in a number of other things. These three people are also co-producers of the show. Then there's Emma Greenwell. She was on the first 3 seasons of Shameless. Another good show. And Rockman Dunbar, one of my favorite shows I've ever seen before in my life, is called Sons of Anarchy. He actually was on seasons 4, season 5, season 6, and season 7. And then another one from that show was a woman named Sarah Jones. She was actually on Sons of Anarchy for 1 season as well. So these are the main characters. Cal they gave him a description as a charismatic, unofficial leader of the Myrist movement. He is kind of the David Miscavige character, where he actually ascends and puts himself into control. Not to ruin anything about the show by knowing this, but basically what's going on when the show starts is Stephen Myers has not been seen in a long time. He is in Peru. He's dying of cancer. Only the elders, or the upper rungers as they're referred to, there's about, I think, 10, we'll just say a maximum of probably 8 to 10 elders, or in this case manager, like in comparison to Scientology, management. So Stephen or Cal kind of wiggles his way in, because Stephen's not around. He kind of wiggles his way in as the now leader of the Myrist organization, which happens through the first season. Michelle Monaghan her name is Sarah. She was born into Myrinism and is one of the higher leaders in the Myrist family. Her husband is Aaron Paul, and the show is basically on the premise of Aaron Paul's character, Eddie Lane, becomes disaffected. Best way to say it is he just starts losing his faith, and the show is based around him discovering, or him trying to find himself within the movement and trying to find some independent thought outside of the movement. So a funny comparison to this is that he actually eventually finds his way out. He then is considered a disaffector, and his family is forced to disconnect from him. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So, there was our other area where Scientology and the show fall very, very close to each other. I don't want to get into anything further because I'm going to give away a lot of the show. There is, I will say this, I had mentioned this, I'm going to go back and read this real quick. So they do, Myrists practice meditation and the use of biofeedback. There's this machine that they actually use in their personal counseling. The counseling they do with themselves is done on a personal level, and there's this machine, I don't remember how it works. This says it's a biofeedback, so it's not really, there's no auditor, there's no one reading an e-meter and saying, what are you thinking about there, what are you looking at there? There is, when a person, and Eddie Lanes, and I'll give this away, when he starts to, he was suspected of having an affair with Sarah Jones's character, Allison Kemp. So he's put into this, but he has to agree to do this. But he's put into this isolation room, and he's given daily confessions, and he's forced to give up what he did wrong. And it is believed, as is in Scientology, that you give it up until they're satisfied that you've given up. You can't say you didn't do anything. You have to confess something, and that's how you get out of it. Which, it's not how, that's not how it works. I mean, it's not a confessional. Okay, so that is my comparison. Again, I do apologize. They go from R1 to R10, not OT1 to OT10. We don't have, Scientology doesn't have OT10, OT8. But I got to tell you, from a personal level, when I started watching the show, I actually had a hard time watching it. The first season was very difficult to watch. I then saw Leah Remedy's show, and I started doing these videos, and I watched the second season, had very little problem with it, and I'm going to go watch it right after we get done with this video. I'm actually going to do one more video tonight, because I have the free time tonight, which I don't have very often anymore. I'm going to do one more video about something that I found out about today. But that's it. Watch the show. Again, as always, if you have any questions about anything that I've said, want more clarification, you can go ahead and make comments on in the comment section. And I hope you actually watched the show, because it's also a very, very well done show. Fucking creepy, but a very well done show. So that's all we have for tonight, and have a good one.